Hello, everyone. This is Cami.
And this is Steph, and this is the Wardalls podcast.
On today's episode, we discuss D&D and tabletop role-playing with our special guest Anne, as well as our normal Q&A session with her. So let's go ahead and get into it.
And thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
How have you been?
I'm doing. I was like, oh my god, it's happening. I'm great. I have been really just playing a ton of Star Wars Outlaws in my downtime and prepping 1,000 D&D sessions and just any kind of nerdy niche I could get into. I'm just like a burrowing animal, just burrow in and just hyper fixate. It's the name of the game out here in these mean internet streets.
Well, Star Wars is something worthy of hyperfixating on.
It is.
Yes.
I haven't stopped since I was 5 years old.
Yeah. Can't stop, won't stop. No power in the verse can stop.
No power in the verse.
But yeah, this is so crazy. How long have you guys been doing the podcast?
This is our third episode.
Awesome.
So, like 5 minutes.
Literally, like less than a week.
3 episodes in less than a week is impressive, though.
It's been such a. It's been it's a runaway train. It's living its own life. I'm just here for the ride at this point.
One thing that is so one thing that I was excited about when you invited me to come and be a guest on this illustrious podcast is that, so much of what we have done when we have our hobby hang is hear everybody's stories. And so I think it's really cool that you're, giving people a platform to share their stories and experience, because I think we really apparently can't speak anymore. I think we find a lot of unity in each other when we talk about all of this. So thanks for having me.
Always. Well, that's what the Wardalls are for. We are here to celebrate and promote and put the spotlight on our fellow women and NBs, and just generally have a community. And of course, you have been among us for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we got to meet last year at Adepticon.
Yeah.
And that was 100% fantastic. So, yeah. So let's go ahead and tell us where we can find you online.
Yeah. So my name is Anne Richmond, and on most places you can find me like on X, I guess the kids are calling it these days, formerly Twitter, as at Anne Richmond, but I'm most active, I would say, on Blue Sky these days. And if you search Anne Richmond on there, you'll find me too. If you want to see any of my old TTRPG content, I have that all on Hearthsinger Games on YouTube. And in terms of things that are bite-sized, where you can get a taste of Anne and who she is on the internet, I would say, aside from my YouTube channel, the Lost Mountain Saga is a Vassan TTRPG podcast. It's an actual play. It's 2 seasons currently, although I think they are looking at doing a third, which is awesome. So you can go and check that out. There's primarily me playing, but I do run an adventure at the tail end of season 2 for my fellow nerds over there, and that is 3 women around the table playing with each other. So for fans of this show, very, very similar. But yeah, those are the main places you can find me. And then if you want to hear me run games, I did 1 season of a show called Hearthsinger Tales. So I hope you can go and check that out too.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
So you said that you do D&D. Tell us about that. What do you have a group that you get together with on a regular basis?
Yeah, I was, really thinking about this recently, because the start of the year, it's really that like new year, new game, new me energy. And we are recording this in January, not to timestamp it, but so many people come out of the holiday season where your focus is spread across family and doing all this, stuff, and you just kind of like miss that
Yeah.
game time, right? And it's really hard to schedule sessions, and then you launch into the new year with all of this energy, like I'm going to start the best campaign I've ever done. I that's my D&D resolution, if you will. And so I think this time is a time where a lot of new games kick up, but as that was happening and I was getting ready to start a new campaign with some local friends and play in person, I play a lot with people that I used to play in person with online. And shameless plug, I work for Roll20. I'm a marketing manager there, and you know having a virtual tabletop, no matter where you're playing, is really the it can be really key to not only guiding your game and providing a space for everybody to imagine and storytell together, but just keeping connection between people who have been pulled apart for whatever reason. I mean, certainly during the start of the pandemic we experienced that, but I moved across the country, and so there are people that I really only see every other week in our games, and some of those games have been going on for 5 or 6 years at this point. And yeah, I have like two games that I'm in that I've been playing that long. Another game that I run that is almost on its fourth year at this point, and they're almost done with their campaign. And yeah, I'm often playing in games, and I just kicked up right in the tail end of last year with the professional casual playing Starfinder every other week on their Twitch stream on
That's so
Fridays.
cool.
So yeah, it's there's a lot of tabletop role playing going on in my life at all times. It's kind of like I'm obsessed. Like I think that would be a fair label to apply
Yeah.
to it. I've got that real theater kid energy, and I have taken that forward into my life.
There is nothing wrong with that. So,
Yeah.
would you say that's your only obsession right now, or are there
No,
other?
I have many problems. I have
They're
many.
not. No, 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 no. Not problems. Opportunities.
Yes. I
So
also
what?
started. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. I was going to ask you what else, but you were already expanding. So please.
One thing that is tough when what you love is TTRPGs and storytelling games is that there's a lot of onboarding, and it's kind of like the same with miniatures, right? And those were my two main hobbies for a long time. And ultimately, when we moved across the country, I was like, we need to find some nerds to be friends with, and we can't wait for me to be done painting, my Shatterpoint squads to do it. Like I want to be able to walk in the door of a game store and start finding our people and putting down roots here. And so right around that time, it was Gen Con, and Lorcana launched. And so I just decided, having never played a collectible card game in my life before, this was our solution. This is what we were going to do. And almost every single Saturday since the very first launch of Galorcana, we have gone to the game store, and it has been the source of many wonderful relationships here on the West Coast. So I'm really grateful to the game for existing, and all the types of people that play it, and our community at our local store Zulu's, for being so awesome.
That's great.
That is
So
fantastic.
were you participating in all the hype when it first came out? Just trying to go and find cards at any store that you possibly could?
Yeah, I think that awakened something in me that I have had to fine tune since then, because I just realized, like, i'm I am buying so many cards. I am buying them at the times where they're priced the highest, and I'm not like a competitive player. I'm certainly someone who has learned a lot, and I think one of the best parts of this past year, as far as things that were cool in gaming for one Anne Richmond, was going to the Lorcana Challenge here in Seattle and playing in the big tournament. But I had no major aspirations of doing super well in the main tournament, but it was in the side events where we were doing drafts and sealed events where I really saw my growth from the first time I sat down at a draft or a sealed event and felt like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't even know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing right now. To, actually doing pretty well and like racking up my prize tickets. And, my husband and I together compiled everything and were able to go to the prize wall and get some cool stuff. And I was like, this is really representative of, you know, the joy of learning something new and meeting a bunch of new people. And I think that was really reflected in that experience for sure. Um, but yeah, going every week and playing, fairly casually, while also, learning about what the competitive life is like, which is, I think I decided after the challenge, maybe less my speed. There's a lot about it that's kind of anxiety inducing to me, and
Hmm.
I would not describe myself as someone who is amazing at card games, but I'm not someone who loves to just be smashed into the ground
Right.
without anything to show for it. And so that aspect of it has been um, really interesting, like especially, I mean, as with any game, like new things come out and the meta shifts and everybody
Hmm.
starts playing different things. Having to sort of like relearn a game every 4 months is really grueling. And
And
so
kind of
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
stressful.
yeah, it is. And, we at one point we were like, okay, we need to make a budget because us just going out and trying to get all these cards, like we need to make a budget. We need to talk about like what our goal is for the enjoyment of this thing. And what we ended up doing was like selling some cards that we had and putting them on a card for Zulus. And then we sold enough cards from those beginning months that we were able to basically just have all of our events paid for at the game store throughout the year so far. And that's been a really great being on the same page, right? Myself and my husband about like what we want to get out of something, I think is really key to enjoying a hobby. Because if you go into the hobby thinking, I'm going to win this tournament, like that's fine. And maybe you will, maybe you will. I don't want to take that away from you if you're out there wanting to be hyper competitive. But if my goal was, let me be a little bit better this week than I was last week, let me learn how to make better choices. Like,
Hmm.
then I could start to feel that progress and
Yeah.
and enjoy it. When my sights were set too high, I sometimes fell into slumps right between each sort of
Yeah.
season of the game.
It can be easy to the knock your feet out from under yourself if you
Mhm.
set your aspirations too high. I mean, the point of
Yeah.
the games is to have fun at the
Yeah.
very core of it. So that's always my
Mm-hmm.
goal. Anything beyond that to me is just icing on
Mm-hmm.
the cake.
I guess, Steph, I'm curious, how do you think about, the role of competitive play and the hobbies that you engage in?
So myself and my husband, we are not super competitive players. We always go into a game wanting to create the most fun experience for our opponent. That's
Mhm.
where we get the fun out of going to a tournament or even at Adepticon. Like,
Yeah.
we do shots with our opponents. Like, we take alcohol and give them a shot glass to take home. Like, we want to make sure that they have a good time. So when I get up to a table and I'm against somebody that's like standoffish and just wants to be competitive and bash my face in, like, I don't really want to
Mhm.
be a part of that. And that's when
Right.
Yeah.
my introvertness comes out, because I immediately shut down, and I just
Mhm.
Yeah. Your
yeah,
walls go up.
exactly, the walls go up, I shut down, I just play the game, I want to be done. And like, obviously this person does not want to have a relaxed game and just have fun with it. They want to just smash my face in, and that's their only goal.
Yeah, there's a level of that I think in for anyone who's hyper competitive, and they may not mean to like
Yeah.
project that sort of stony exterior, but it can be uh
Cold.
Yes.
cold. Yeah,
Yes.
really at the end of our sentence, it can be cold, and to that end, I think it creates almost like an unwelcoming feeling even if they
Yeah.
didn't
And
intend
and
it.
I do
And I think that even happens.
I was just going to say
Oh,
I
go
do
ahead.
have one story where this exact thing happened at Adepticon 2 years
Mm.
ago. We were playing in the Marvel Crisis Protocol Teams event. I'm not going to name any names on who we were up against, but their only goal was to win. And they rolled up with like the most meta list at the time. And we come in, we were playing Web Warriors that year. And we gave them a run for their money. Like, we thought they were just gonna like kill all of our stuff, but we knew our tricks that we could do with our squad, and we made them work for their win. They ended up winning 18-16. And yeah,
Hmm.
Wow.
and
Yeah.
they were so mad at that game, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, if you would have just had fun with it, that is a great game. And they went on their
Yeah.
podcast and talked crap about it, and I'm like, that's exact that's exactly the
Boo.
type of person I do not want to be.
Well, and so this is the thing, right? I think there are times where you are able to bring fun to the table, and
Mhm.
it kind of shakes your opponent because they weren't expecting fun. Uh
No fun at Adepticon
like
at
I
all.
walk no fun at Adepticon. Boo. No, my whole experience with that at the Lorcana Challenge was I walked in there with a Robin Hood themed deck, and it was Robin Hood and like a little Philip from Sleeping Beauty on the side as like my most it was very thematic, and I called it like Forest Boys or something like that. I can't remember. But uh
If you haven't named your list, it is
then what are
not a
you
complete
even
list.
doing?
Right. It's not done.
And it was really cool because there were people that I could tell were really good and had been, when I won a couple games, then I started playing other people who won a couple games. It's kind of how that works. And then I was, thrown down from Olympus back with the rabble very unceremoniously. But I would take games off of some of these good players, and they would be shocked because I wasn't playing a meta
Mhm.
list. And so that meant that I could route them sometimes, or put something in front of them that they just didn't see coming because people don't normally play those
Right.
cards in those configurations. And so that was like really fun for me to be able to, show off what I built my deck to do in a way that felt I walked into that challenge with a deck that was mine, that I hadn't like pulled from the internet. I spent months crafting it and months working with all of these awesome people that I had met at my game store over the previous year, where we were, all working on it together because they knew what I wanted to do, and they really embraced and celebrated the fact that like I felt shitty about my inability in my mind to build a list, and I was always just net decking and pulling things from the internet to play, and they really helped me through it, and I loved that. Obviously, at any tournament you're going to have some of those matches where you're
Mhm.
like, wow, I really just was unceremoniously thrashed. uh but then there's also really cool
Yeah.
things as well like that, and it all for me comes back to telling stories at the table. You're talking about web warriors, and um you know selling the
Mhm.
energy of like whatever squad you showed up with to these games. And that's why for me, like, everything always comes back to D&D, comes back to storytelling, comes back to theater. And what's the
Yeah.
most fun. And so, any board game I play, it's basically a role playing game at the end of the
I
day,
mean,
even if it's
right?
cards, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not at the table going pew pew,
Oh,
then
yeah.
you're not having fun.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite aspect of the role playing games?
So I was a theater major. And when I was in school, you get typecast. You're told like this is how you're going to be successful in theater, and you're this or you're not that. You'll never be that. And I came out of theater school feeling incredibly talented, but also very sad. I felt like I was prepared to sit and wait my turn, for when I quote unquote turned 40, because then I'll work, said my instructors. And had I waited that long, that means I still wouldn't have gotten started. And so I had played some D&D in high school with a friend and her brother and enjoyed it. But there just came this time where I said, I want to be anyone. I want to do anything. And this was during fourth edition Dungeons and Dragons. So I had played 3.5 to start in high school, and then fourth edition just after college. And we sat down at that table, and I made the hottest little gnome bard with a thunder elemental living inside of them, who played these giant djembe drums. Like, and I was like, oh, I'm a badass and I can tell stories like this. I can be her, or, I can be this hulking barbarian, or I can be, uh, you know, nothing, anything but a fighter. But it just started to sort of heal this part of me, I think, that um really wanted to tell all of these different types of stories. And I was also, even though I loved, musical theater and Shakespeare and all of that when I was in school, I mean, I still love those things, right? But I constantly felt like there wasn't going to be a variety of paths for me forward to not just act but to do design. And I liked doing costume design, and I love cosplay to this day, and I liked writing original work. And so discovering Dungeons and Dragons as a hobby and doing it with people who similarly love the theatricality that role play can bring. It was really about finding the people I wanted to tell stories with, and that's always what it's been about ever since. So that's really how I got into it. And then after fifth edition came out, everybody wanted to play D&D, and now I'm beating them off with a stick, guys. I just, so many people want to play D&D with me.
Well, for good reason. You first of all, you play hard. Like
Mm.
you get into it, and just from watching you and hearing your stories, I love every bit of that. But also you tell a good story as well. Um I have been in role playing games since the early 90s.
Mm.
No, the late 80s. I was in June. No, I was in high school. Whew, things get fuzzy. Anyway, I have role played since, we'll call it 89.
uh,
Um, I've been role playing and nonstop. I've played pretty much every edition of D&D. I've played other games. I'm, dabbled in writing games, and yet in the last year and a half since
mhm.
we met, I have learned so much from you.
Oh, well, that's so, I'm so honored to hear that. The thing about the thing about how great I am. No, I'm kidding. The thing about uh finding games that speak to you, especially in this weird world we live in where like actual play is a thing. I think people sort of set a standard for them. They want to be, like Critical Role or like Dimension 20 or all of these things. And it can be incredibly inspirational to see the sort of like aspirational format of that these games can take. But really it's about, and it's exactly what we talked about before, it's setting a goal for your hobby. What do you consider success for yourself, so that you don't feel disappointed along the way, or like you're not measuring up to some weird standard you had in your own mind. So I think for me it was about finding people who cared who wanted to play hard, like you said, and to experiment with telling really powerful stories in this format, and then to also recognize that when you're doing it as performance, like when I'm doing an actual play, that is a completely different version of how I am as a player than when I'm playing in a home game. It's just a different beast. You are improvising a play when you are doing an actual play program, and there's things like pacing, and there's stuff that I let go of because we really need to be in this moment until, and we're almost at the end of the hour, and there's got to be a reveal from the DM, like things like that that I'm thinking of within the realm of actual play. I'm not thinking of at the like table when I'm running a game or playing in a game. And so I think understanding that there's like a separation between those two things these days, where so many people are watching people play games, is really important.
So, um, kind of as a parallel to that, I guess.
Hmm.
Have there ever been those moments where you felt you haven't been heard at the table or in any of your other hobbies because you are a woman, and how do you deal with that?
Yes. Um, the short answer is yes. I think before you realize how great good D&D is, you'll accept bad role-playing game experiences as like, oh, that's just how it is. Finding yourself when you're trying something new and sitting down maybe at a convention, right, where you're getting a demo run for you. I recognized very quickly that my desire to have a conversation between the characters or ask somebody about their dead mom was like not really welcome at a lot of tables that were male dominated in those spaces. um I also found that like men tended to respond more to women they were partnered with at the exclusion of anybody else who was not like a romantic interest, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. And I'm talking
Oh
about that like
yeah.
above table. So like my best friend and her ex-husband, we were in a game together that lasted many years, and it ended with like a very big fight um between like it was an argument that has since been laid to rest. Like, love you guys. Sorry if you're out there listening to this, but like, I hope they won't mind me saying this. But like, I really felt that a lot of focus had been put on the DM's wife at the time, uh, and that anytime I had an idea or was bringing something to the table, that oh, we don't really have time for that, or but we went to the place where it's very much like in Firefly when he's like, I want to go to the town where I'm a hero, right? Like,
Yeah.
we went to her like hometown, and we, raised her up to be the arch cleric of her religion and like all of this stuff. And I had provided, you know, I had answered all the DM's questions about my backstory, and I really would have liked to, engage with some of those things. And I think there's so many tools out there that have been developed to make sure people are heard at your table, that there's really not an excuse for that anymore. Like at the time, session zero was not like a term that I heard bandied about a whole ton. Now I know when I'm sitting down at a table that as a dungeon master, I want to know it's not just it's about me as a dungeon master. It's about me sitting down and saying, here's the type of game I'm looking to run. Is that going to work for you? But also, what do you want? Where between all of these, diverse uh needs from this experience can we find, this morsel, this delicious morsel of role playing, storytelling goodness that we can experience together. But when there's not that, I think you can feel ignored. You can feel on the outside, and I think I've also felt that in being in competitive card games for the first time. Like I'm very lucky in Lorcana that there's a pretty diverse set of people who are interested in it, but there are your very classic card flicking, magic playing. I'm only here for the math and to make my cool card engine go burr. People that I feel not taken seriously by, or ignored by, or laughed at by. So I think across all of my interests, miniatures as well, even working in miniatures, I was told by people like, "Oh, well, you're not really in the hobby though. Like, you're not a part of it though." And I was like, "I have my own painted Warhammer army. Like, what is it going to
Yeah.
take to
Right.
be a part of it? Like, what are these goalposts we have?" Or, when people ask you at conventions like, "Oh, I see you play, these games, or you've been a guest with these, with Glass Cannon or whatever." Like, they treat you like you're just starting a hobby, but it's a hobby I've been in since high school. And so I think there is this just like assumption that women just discovered games,
Right.
that is really harmful. And I think, it all comes back again to that session zero thing of like, the reason it can be great is when we ask each other questions about what we want and what we're doing in a space.
Hmm.
When you make assumptions about why someone is in a space, whether it's quote unquote for the attention, or because they just want to feel like they're finally winning at something, or there's a lot of things out, there's a lot of harmful rhetoric around competitive players too, and some of it's earned and some of it's not. Um, so yeah, I mean, we're talking about, I'm talking about from my perspective as like, for me, a femme presenting person in the space, but there's a lot of reasons we misunderstand each other across the board, and it's all because we don't ask enough questions. We're too busy telling people what we want to hear about what they want.
Hmm.
Right. And of course, that's not just a gender
Hmm.
issue. That's anybody. So
Yeah,
yeah.
but it is felt, and I just want to be very clear about this. I think there is an element of it that's felt due to misogyny, right?
Yes.
And the being discounted and the being diminished. And
Oh,
if you have
definitely.
an opinion, you're being difficult, like all of these things apply to women sometimes more so than men. But it doesn't mean that they're the only ones who have ever felt like no one paid attention to them,
Of
or
course. Yeah.
were ignoring them. So I just want to be clear that like I think a lot of my experiences do stem from the fact that I was showing up as, a woman or a single woman who was by my definition not like conventionally attractive uh at these tables. And so I think that does, unfortunately, have an effect on the way people receive you in those spaces, even though it shouldn't.
Oh,
Hmm.
absolutely.
And what advice do you have for future Wardalls who might be interested in this or really any hobby?
Yeah, I think you need to find your people, and the war dolls are great for that. I will say you need to find your people who will hear you out when some of these negative things happen, because they're gonna happen sometimes, but they aren't they don't define your
Hmm.
space in the hobby. You define your space in the hobby. And the more you can create those soft places to land within the community, and the more questions you ask people, and you know not being afraid to say no, or to remove yourself from a situation that is toxic, I think it is really key. And the other thing that I would say, as somebody who works in games, is that recognizing that your dream job is still a job, because a lot of us get out here and we're like, oh my gosh, I love this, I would love to work with role-playing games or miniatures or cards, or putting on LARP events, or like whatever it is. But you really need to ask yourself, deep down, if you're prepared to let this job affect the way you feel about your own hobby. And it's something that, I've heard a lot over the years, and I've been like, yeah, but that'll never be me. Like, I'll never not be able to engage in the things I love just because like something happened at work one
Hmm.
day, right? And so I would just caution people, um to set boundaries and make sure they read contracts. And like it sounds weird, but it's like I think there's a lot of people who imagine like, oh, when I'm working in games, everything will be solved and it'll be my dream job. But it's just a whole new set of challenges. And so I I am someone who has to feel passionate about what they do, and I love being able to bring role-playing games to as many people as possible through the work that I'm doing now. But I do think that people need to remember at all times that like they're in a job and it's
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
profession. And while it can be fun, if you're one of those people who's like, I want to make my passion my job, that's something to think about.
So, Anne, what kind of things motivate you? Or
Mm.
if you don't have the motivation, what do you do to get you, in the groove? You know,
I watch a buttload of Survivor. Um,
hey, if it
and
works for you,
I think, the for me, and this is where like the ADHD kicks in. I love all of these hobbies so much. And I love playing video games, but like I think the more that I can accept that I'm going to bounce around to different things, I'm not the kind of person who's just going to have one hobby that they do at the exclusion of everything else. I will always play more role playing games than is strictly recommended. Like that's I think if I could point to like one thing that I do all the time, no matter what, but that's because I can show up to games I'm not running and somebody else is in the steering wheel and I am, volleying balls back at them, right? It's a very collaborative feeling. And so you can kind of get yourself out of a rut, or you can rely on, your game master, your dungeon master, and say, like, I don't really like what's happening with this character. I'm feeling stuck. Like, what could we do? Right? There's somebody else that's there for you. And so I take that into these other hobbies when I get stuck. Like, I remember when I finished my Shatterpoint terrain, I was like, God, I love this, but I need to do something else, right? I need to not have my living room taken over by paints, and dry things drying on newspaper for what felt like 1,000 years, right?
right?
Um, and so I think bringing that idea of like, let me use somebody else's thought or another experience to sort of jumpstart my enjoyment of a thing. Move to something else. Go play World of Warcraft for a little bit. Go play some Lorcana. Go, you know, jump around to these different things, because the thing that matters, your enjoyment of the thing. Like, no one needs to flog themselves over whether or not they've finished their army. Like, if you finishing the army is what's fun to you, like painting, then finish it. But if you're like, I'm not having fun and I would rather play Baldur's Gate, right? Or I would rather go out to dinner and go to the movies and see Wicked 5 times in theaters, not naming names. It's me. It's your girl. It's your girl Alphaba out here in these streets. You know what I mean? Like, do what is fun. Like, there's nothing about this that has to feel, like you're chained
Hmm.
to something. And so if you are feeling unmotivated, find something that motivates you. And then, for me, I hadn't painted in months, and then we started playing Oathsworn, which is this board game that's like very much a role playing asymmetric cooperative board game experience. Um, and we had all these miniatures that were on the table and they were gray, and I was like, ugh, disgusting, disgusting. I need to see the miniature. I need to realize this. And then instead of playing, last night we all went over, and instead of playing, we just painted. We painted our little characters that we've been playing since like
That's awesome.
Right.
September or November or something
Yeah,
like
got to
that.
fix it.
And so yeah, you just let it sounds stupid, but let what motivates you motivate you, and stop raking yourself across the coals for being not motivated to do something that's supposed to
Yeah.
be fun. Just go do something else until you're ready to do the other thing again.
Yeah. So, what other projects or games are you interested in getting into?
Oh god. It's terrifying. Well, there's the new Survivor board game just came out, and I'm really excited about it. It was designed by Exploding Kittens and the host of Survivor,
Okay.
and I am just very excited about it. So
Oh,
I think,
yeah, that sounds amazing. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
I'm really hype about it. I've been, like I said, I'm really loving Star Wars Outlaws right now. It's really making me want to play the Star Wars RPG a lot and reminding me of what the experience of doing the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser at Disney World was like, and just making me uh love something that, while I was working at a company that had licenses with these various games, was like very much, I still loved it, but like it was what I was
Mm.
working on. And this is like the first sort of joyful, like just for me Star Wars joy I've had, aside from Skeleton Crew, which is not a game or a project, but I really enjoyed the Goonies like take on Star Wars that it provided. So yeah, that's working on finishing Star Wars Outlaws is going to take a long time, I think, because I'm very much a completionist when it comes to those types of games. But
Oh, I
um,
understand. And I've still not dove into Outlaws,
yeah,
because I'm a little mad at it. I wanted it to be. I I don't know if it's an age thing or just how my brain works or
Mhm.
just whatever. I prefer a game to be multiplayer,
Sure.
and I want, and I know there's some games out there, but I want a modern Star Wars game. Are
Mhm.
you guys listening out there? I want a modern Star Wars game, um, that's multiplayer, like
Yeah.
open world multiplayer. And if Outlaws had been like that, and I could play Star Wars with my friends
Ooh, yeah.
online, we wouldn't even be doing this.
No, I feel that. I do feel that. Um,
So,
the other, I guess, like thing I would be interested in is uh Pathfinder. I do like Pathfinder, but Starfinder second edition is coming out. That's what we've been playing on the professional casual. We've been working our way through the playtest materials, and very soon, we'll be blasting off with more Pathfinder second edition, coming out from Paizo. And I love that game. I love reading those books. And yeah, I would love to be doing that. And I started playing Vampire the Masquerade in the last year. I would love to be doing more of that, because I do, as much as I love the high fantasy of D&D, I really love horror, and collaborative storytelling games as a vehicle for that is so fun. And that's why I loved being on the Lost Mountain Saga, which is again, I mentioned it earlier, but it's really like a Nordic horror experience. And uh, I would love to be playing more Vaesen in the next year for sure. For sure, I would love to be doing that, and Call of Cthulhu. So really, I think this year, Daggerheart. Listen, I could go on. I could just list games uh, forever. But I think overall, that could be summed up as like I would really like to play some other games that aren't D&D this year, even if they're one shots, and then run some games that aren't D&D this year, because it really, you know, it's exactly what the last question was about. It's really motivates you
right.
to get back into it. And this year, I have I used to have more clients for like professional games. I
Hmm.
only have one group that I'm running, and it's my friend Andrea, who is also a friend of the pod, if you will, uh,
Yes.
a war doll through and through. And she hired me to run a game for her and her husband and her sister and their father. And their ask in session zero was like just a classic game. And they wanted to own an ice cream shop and kill orcs. And that is it. Like that is after coming from so many tables where
and
I'm like,
and
talk
now
to
I'm
me about
jealous.
talk to me about the depth of your feelings about your father who hates you. They were like, we don't want to have any like emotional complications. That's not how we want to play. And that's kind of one of the cool things about running games professionally is like you run different styles for different types of people, and it makes you grow as a dungeon master too. Um, and so while that wouldn't be like my choice for my home game, it's
Hmm.
so fun to just open up. They chose the adventure that's in the essentials kit, Dragon of Icespire Peak. That is what they wanted to play. This starter kit adventure, and so it's like very much back to basics, and we're exploring all the new D&D 2024 rules with this old module. And Yeah, it's been really fun and really a really great way to sort of onboard to experimenting with some of these new rules as
That
well.
that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So for aspiring DMs and game masters in
Hmm.
general, are there any kind of tools or influencers online that you think they should look at that would
Oh
help
my
them?
god. Well, Heartsinger Games, even though I'm not actively posting, has a lot of. I'm being facetious, but it does have a lot of really good like evergreen content on there about like how to involve more story, more like how what's better. Is it better to have a backstory or build from a front story? And like thinking about like what you want out of your game in that way. But it also has you know tips and tricks on or reviews of different products and things. I think ultimately, um, obviously, I'm really excited about what we're doing at Roll 20. I think there's a new character sheet we've released, and you can build characters now outside of your games. And when you want to use the new rule set for the new core rulebook bundle that's coming out and ending with the monster manual, being able to have like things that you just drag and drop onto somebody's sheet, or monsters that you drag onto the table, and then you can just drag and drop magical items onto them, and automatically adjust scores and things like that. I think some of these pieces of technology a lot of people are resistant to when you're sitting around like a table together, and I would 100% understand that, because I love to have like a huge piece of terrain and play out like an epic battle on the tabletop. But there is something to be said if you're somebody, for accessibility reasons. Like for me, I'm really bad at dumb, stupid, small arithmetic. It stresses me out. And I can tell a better story when I have something there that's doing that grunt work for me. Right. So I think finding tools, if you're somebody who wants to focus on the story, getting into Roll 20 and building your character in there, it's like there's now that's pod racing, guys. It's it feels you can feel like you're flying, right? Because you're like, I have music and I have amazing maps and I have all this, helpful content. If you like buy an adventure on there, it's already like pre-organized, like all the monsters are in the right caves and the right amount of them and all of that. And so I think, Roll 20 obviously is an incredible tool. Whether you're like paid like a pro subscriber, or just like you can log in for free and make characters using all the free content from Wizards. And just try it out. I also really love for in-game or in-person games. I love these. God, what are they? They're like ArcLight is the company. They have like templates for spells, which again, when you're just trying to like adjudicate whether something hits, um, it's really helpful to just be like, my fireball hits these 10 dudes. Like
Hmm.
instead of going, well, it's 10 squares. And where do those 10 squares start? Like, immediately. So I love that. I also love condition rings. There are lots of though you can like 3D print them at home, or people sell them like lots of people sell them online.
Hmm.
Um, and then I would say deciding whether you want to have a DM screen or have like just your computer is a question you can only answer for yourself. But I like to be up and standing when I'm running combat and sitting when I'm doing role playing stuff. And so it's not a tool, but making sure that you have set up your space so that you will be comfortable when you're running games is a big part of it. Because if you haven't felt the stress of asking 5 people to roll for initiative and then realizing you have to run that,
Right.
it's a hell of a drug, guys, if you've never tried it. So I just recommend, getting the tools that are going to make you feel comfortable, but not getting so bogged down in your prep and your tools that you're not present and having a good time, because that's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
That is the secret sauce.
And who do you think we should interview next?
Have you guys talked to Elle?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she was episode 1.
Oh, well,
You can go back
you can go back and listen to it right now.
and listen to it right
What a
now.
great ad. If you're discovering this and didn't start from episode 1. No, Elle is wonderful. I also think finding folks who are in LARP, I think, is such a fascinating experience. And I know, Cami, it's when you have experience in. And it's just such an elevation of some of these themes that I've talked about that I've been too scared to do. I mean, not too scared to do. I just haven't had a lot of opportunity to get into, something like Beakeline or like some of these very large LARP, almost
Yeah.
like weekend events and things like that. And I would love to hear more about that and what that's like for people and navigating that space as someone beginning in the hobby and things. I would personally love to hear about that.
I'm kind of ashamed I haven't thought of that.
Well, the first one's free, Cammy.
Well, of course, we do have a couple of LARPers in the War Dolls. They're retired LARPers, and I'm sure we will absolutely uh, touch on that because there are. You've heard some of the stories
Yeah,
we've shared in our hobby hang,
totally.
but yeah, there are still some newer LARPers, and I should touch on that.
I would also love to hear from somebody who's in a hyper competitive space, because I think the assumption oftentimes is, oh, they're here with their husband, right?
Hmm.
Or they're here with their boyfriend, or, when we're talking about, women in the space.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And so I think it would be really cool to hear from, whether it's, somebody who plays like hyper competitively in the miniature space or magic or anything, right? Or esports or something like that. It would be awesome to hear what that experience and what that journey was like.
Yeah.
I
I would
definitely
love
agree
that.
with you.
Well, Anne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of
This was a
course.
lot of fun, and
It's so great.
we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
We really do.
Of course. I love you guys. I think this group is so really truly welcoming to all. And yeah, I couldn't recommend it more to anybody who's out there and like we were talking about earlier, looking for your people and your community,
Yes.
and that group that's going to uplift your experience and help you champion what you want out of your hobbies.
I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have said it better. You're so good with words, and I appreciate you so much. So,
Oh,
everybody, the War Dolls are out here, and we're waiting for you. And you can find us at thewardolls.com. And we are at the War Dolls on Instagram and YouTube. And we're on Facebook. I believe we're at the War Dolls there as well, but you can find all of the links on Instagram. So come and see us. Feel free to talk to any one of us. Steph will be at Adepticon preaching and handing out stickers and
flyers,
flyers
I have
and
friendship
recruitment.
bracelets this year.
recruitment.
Hell
That's
yes.
wonderful. And she is going to have a live hobby hang at Adepticon as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
Right?
I can't wait to see what you create for Adepticon, because last year, are you ready to outdo yourselves?
We're trying. We're trying. Yeah, so we
Can't wait to see it.
have MCP teams that we're working on. Unfortunately, with Adepticon putting all of the team events on the same day, we are not able to do Star Wars Legion this year. So
Oh, sure.
we're going with the MCP stuff.
It's going to be great. I
I'm very
have
excited.
all the faith in you.
Thanks.
I wish I
So,
was there to take shots with you, but
right, me too.
I'll
Me
take one
too.
for you.
Yes, but I'll be
yeah,
there next. I'm definitely going to be there next year. So,
amazing.
and I will bring Anne with me.
Perfect.
Oh boy.
You guys can carpool.
So everybody, yes, we will. We will. So everybody, thank you for listening to the War Dolls podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much, Steph and
Thank you,
Anne, for joining
Cami.
me.
Yeah. And thank you, world, for having us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.